People somehow think being a visionary is enough to run a business. Absolutely not. What we call now, or back then, as pain or painful moments, actually have been the best parts of our growing. I'm sitting there and thinking, what are we supposed to bring to the table? And here I'm sitting thinking, oh, how on earth are we going to experiment? We don't have a penny. And that within 3 months, we had a check of £250,000 for the first development. Number one lesson, we didn't know what are we supposed to protect. We were just excited that there was a business. So we had to face our first litigation against IPR. I would have probably never started that sort of a founder journey because it's very painful, but also very rewarding. Business was very young, baby was young, and no funds because we were in debts of 250,000. So you got to really have that grit. You got to have that passion. You got to have that persuasion and believe in what you really start. I see every day in, day out myself as a mom, as a typical end user, and that helps me. You will like what I'm going to say, Ronnie.
Welcome to this podcast brought to you by MPA and EFN.
I'm Talitha Heaton.
And I'm Ronnie Munster.
In this series, we help business owners up and down the country navigate the sometimes perilous waters of starting their own business.
Each week, we talk to business people, learn of their successes and failures and their experiences, and most importantly, gain their shared insights into what it is to run and grow a company in challenging times.
So, Devi, thank you so much for joining us today. So you're co-founder and CEO of i3 Simulations. Could you tell us a little bit about what your business does?
Sure. Firstly, thank you for having me here today. Really excited to share the journey as well as the business. i3 Simulations is a medtech company offering intuitive, immersive, and interactive medical simulations for medical professionals. These professionals can actually practice to perfection in a very safe and carbon-friendly environments through the advancements of artificial intelligence and extended reality technologies.
Wow, okay.
That's quite something, isn't it? Tell me about this journey. How did you get there? Because obviously everybody's talking about AI now. Everybody has it as an app on their phone or on their computer. But you didn't jump into this in the last 5 minutes. Presumably it's been quite a journey.
I wish I did jump into it for the last 5 minutes. No, you would be surprised. The journey goes back to 17 years.
Right.
Yes. And our core team involved in building the proprietary technology, underlying technology for these simulations, have been the pioneers in the space of extended reality and AI, blending AI into extended reality to give personalized simulation training. And I remember back in 2009, there wasn't a word called virtual reality technology. We were trying to coin up words to express what we were trying to do. So yeah, it's 17 years of the making.
But what made you start? Did you suddenly sit down, have a cup of tea and there was a brainwave? Or is it something that you'd been working on for some time?
I wish I knew. I would have probably never started that sort of a founder journey because it's very painful, but also very rewarding. And what made me start is I was just having fun in life. I mean, I came here from India as a student to do my master's in human resources management. I was just a year's degree, and I've done well, got my degree by the time I was 21, and but I was very ambitious, and there was an opportunity for me to become a fund manager for European Union Fund, and at the time UK have got the Pan Olympic project, and but they were worrying on the background because they didn't have enough skill set locally to prepare for Olympics. And that's when Pan Olympic projects and funding came along from the EU. And as a fund manager, I got the job, and my job role was to look at opportunities to upskill young people and local workforce in London to prepare towards these Olympic requirements. And that's when I was exploring technology quite closely, because my friends were, who now are the co-founders, were very much in the AI and computer graphics backgrounds. And that's when we felt technology had an opportunity, and that went into training.
But why medical specifically? Was that something that was part of your background or your co-founder's background?
No, none at all. So that then have to go back to my 17-year journey, I suppose. And so the when we were exploring, when I was exploring in my job role in London, how to take technology and put that into training, I was exposed to a completely new sector. And at the same time, while I was working full time, we as friends were just having fun and saying, hey, we need to put up a startup, have a startup. And they wanted to take AI into mainstream. We didn't have a clue what that means. We set up a company called AI Solve. So it was like, why? Because it was not your, it was more about with A, you start right on that catalog first, alphabetical order. So yeah, AI Solve, thinking we're going to solve all the problems with artificial intelligence. This was back in 2007. It's very early. Pretty quickly, we realized there was no opportunity for a startup because AI was predominantly used in the gaming sector. And where you're competing with other deep-pocketed brands like Sony, Microsoft. So we felt we wouldn't have a chance because we're starting with zero funding. And that's when we started to explore the other opportunities of taking gaming and AI into wider segments. So we went into not just creating immersive and interactive content, we were creating intelligent content for retail brand engagement, for pure fun and play, for entertainment purposes, as well as serious games such as training and education.
So you were a real trailblazer then with AI, and it was well before everyone knew what it was and people weren't talking about ChatGPT and all of this kind of thing like we do today. So how was the response when you kind of communicated the idea and started gaining that traction and bringing it to market? How did you explain the concept, and did people get it straight away?
If I were to do these things a little bit differently now, I think I should have opened up a non-profit charity, a training school. That would have been a better way to have done it. At least I would have had that recognition. But no, I think advocacy became super critical to what we did as a business. And a lot of pro bono work in terms of free consultancy. Just a big part of that consultancy time was going into educating the markets on what these latest cutting edge emerging technologies could do for them. 9 out of 10 people in the market didn't even understand half of what we were saying. So we were way too early to the market. But then there was some recognition in the process because 2009, we were still about 4 of us. And we for 3 consecutive years took Gold Innovation Awards in e-learning category, won an international awards, competing against British Airways, Virgin Atlantic, and General Dynamic, GE, and so on and so forth. So,
and were there benefits to you being a smaller business when you're competing against these giant companies that, like you said, have very deep pockets? Were there some strengths in being a smaller business that you could apply to give yourself that competitive edge?
Oh, totally. And which is probably one of our biggest strengths to date. Although we have grown in this process from being the 4 people that we were back then. The biggest strength I think most startups would have is the fact that you can be nimble. You are small. You should control your values and culture and values. You have to really, really hold on quite tightly to that. You're bound to lose a big part of that as you grow. But every time you feel the sense of losing it, you need to go back and bring it back. And that has been the biggest challenge.
When you first started, when you knocked on the first door and made that first phone call and said, "Hi, I've got this idea," did people actually stop and listen, or did you find that because you were so far ahead of your time that people said, "Look, I don't take cold calls," and put the phone down? How did you make that first breakthrough? Was it just persistence?
Interesting, because it happened the other way around for us, strange enough. We didn't have to go and knock, we were headhunted.
Right.
So, yeah, we three were, again, alumni from University Bedfordshire. Nothing too fancy, but back then the university was pretty well known for the computer sciences department, and it did produce some great work. And I was doing my human resources, so I always enjoyed learning more about people and people skills. So when we founded the company with my co-founders, who were actually brothers, one being a computer graphics PhD drop-off, and the other AI specialist from a gaming background, I actually married one of the brothers, the elder brothers. That probably spent too much time as founders. But what happened was the head of the department at the university knew how strong they were, and particularly my husband, but also the group CTO, quite a visionary. And he would be well ahead of time, where you would see how he always would see different technologies coming together. And this was sort of well known to the head of the departments there. And there was a key sponsor to the university, particularly to the computer science department, local businessman. And he wanted to do something much, much more ahead of time for in the e-learning space. So that's when our name was recommended, and we went and sat in front of this gentleman, Jan Talensky, really lovely gentleman, Dr. Jan Talensky. And I was surprised, because it was just an hour before I went into that meeting, did some homework and realized they were already the leading in the country. So he was Apprentice Training Limited was his company. Train for Trade Skills were his company. So they were the guys who were producing the best e-learning materials for plumbing, electrical wiring, all kinds of hands-on vocational skills, and supplying to enterprises like British Gas and whatnot. And I was sitting there and thinking, what are we supposed to bring to the table? They already have the best e-learning that I've ever seen. So that's how our journey started.
That was a lucky break indeed.
That was a lucky break indeed, and I'm always very grateful for that introduction to this gentleman.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You mentioned earlier on in your intro that there have been painful moments on this journey. Do you want to share some of those painful moments, how they came about, how you resolved them? Because that's one of the things that we're interested in, as not just as people, but members of the business community as well, because pain can sometimes cause all sorts of problems, and once it's solved, you realize that you could approach things differently, and then other people can benefit from understanding how you dealt with an issue that I'm sure would be common to other businesses.
Sure. So Ronnie, I think what we call now, or back then, as pain or painful moments, actually have been the best parts of our growing. And I'm sure most other founders would have said very similar things, because there's always opportunities into every aspect. And some of the painful moments have been, as I said, we've had this wonderful introduction with this gentleman, and when my first question was, what are we supposed to bring to the table? So he said, well, this is what I do, and give me something better. And then at that time we had, in the gaming world, Nintendo Wii, which was using all this sort of a gesture-based interaction and then complete immersive sandbox environments for gaming. So quite advanced. That hasn't come to anything outside gaming by that point. So my co-founders, being these technology geeks, they were like, okay, we could experiment. And here I'm sitting thinking, oh, how on earth are we going to experiment? We don't have a penny to even experiment and put that sort of time. And I just said, well, we need to prototype, but there'll be a cost. And this gentleman said, what is the cost? I didn't even know what that cost is. I just made up a number. And I said, £850, because that's a big number for us back then. And my co-founders, we were all students, let's not forget. They thought, oh, there's no way she's going to pull off £850 for a prototype. No one will pay for a prototype. It's supposed to be given for free. And this gentleman said, yeah, I'm up for it. And he writes a check right then and there and gives us the £850. We were over the moon. We were going to write away our lives for that at that point as students. So yes, that gave us a point where we built something completely different. And that within 3 months, we had a check of £250,000 for the first development. That within 2 years, not within 1.5 years, went into £500,000. And to the point where we immediately, within the 18 months, were attracting, we had a JV written down, 70-30. It then attracted government contracts to the potential values of 25 million USD. So everything happened so quickly. And we were these 3-4 member people in the spotlight. And that's when the problem started. Because we were 3 people. IPR protection, number 1 lesson. We didn't know what are we supposed to protect. We were just excited that there was a business. And not necessarily this gentleman, but certainly people surrounding this person, although he's the ultimate person, starts to get a bit uncomfortable with the fact that, well, there are only still 4 members that just graduates, and there's no way we want to be giving away these projects to them. And that's when politics started to play out in the business world. And that led to an litigation, an IPR litigation, where we were threatened to be, the first time I ever heard the word called injunction, a high court injunction. And I was lucky that I had advisory board at the time, and I was fortunate to form that. And some of that advisory board consisted of advisors who actually advised London School of Economics and some of the popular universities. And they saw, and also luckily their family, extended family, were advising the governments and actuaries and so forth. And they said, this letter means nothing. This notice should mean nothing. Injunction is not a particularly high court injunction. No one can get it overnight. You'll be surprised. They bought a high court injunction within 24 hours. And this is when they still owed us, of the $500,000, they still owed us bills around 250,000. They were holding us to ransom. To give away the entire technology. We built the world's first handheld virtual reality controller, for which we have 2 patents against it. And that was a working prototype. We had complete evidence of videos and whatnot. So we had to face our first litigation against IPR.
That must have been incredibly stressful and scary, with the amount of experience you had in your business and have it being your first business. Obviously, you mentioned you had advisors, but how did you kind of manage the stress, and could you see the other end and the positive kind of at the end of the experience, or how did it feel? It sounds very stressful.
It was very stressful at the time, and I think I was quite naive as a CEO, and my team, my fellow founders were very naive. We were all just still in our late 20s by that point. I was married. I had my my son, who was 1 year old, or just under 1 year old by that point. So yeah, the business was very young. Baby was young. And no funds, because we were in debts of 250,000 because unpaid bills. Probably they had the plan all the way through. We wouldn't know that. We were too new into business. And the painful part of that was knowing, so our only hope was to get the litigation paid through the insurance, because we were fortunate that we had the insurance cover with was Hiscox. And they initially refused, as would any insurers would try. They refused, saying that, well, you don't qualify for this because you put down as a software company and this is to do with some sort of hardware. And I had to quickly do a crash course, self-teach myself what litigation means, and then learn the nitty-gritties of wording. And then we could convince the Hiscox that we qualify, because it's all down to the software that's integrating both. So fortunately, we got that insurance cover, and we were represented by the best of the best lawyers in town, that's Pins and Masons. So the journey begins there. And so that was my crash course, except for not having a certificate, legal certificate. I literally had to self-teach myself everything about commercial law.
But presumably out of that, when you go forward with any new venture, and anybody listening now, what advice would you give them? If you're starting out with a venture, for example, I met a couple of young innovators. One is in something called merged reality. He had to explain what it was to me. But what would you, if somebody's starting out on this journey, given what you've just said, what lessons would you say they need to take from that? Because that sounds, as Talitha said, really stressful.
Yeah, absolutely. But then, to be honest with you, I think this is, if you were to plan, I mean, I may have to slightly deviate, because I was once called for being a guest lecturer for a Cambridge business school. And I said, okay, what am I supposed to talk? They said, well, Devi, could you talk about business strategy? I said, yeah, that's fine. And just the day before the lecture, I was sitting there and thinking, wow, strategy is all about planning. A lot of that is about like strategizing and planning and putting these detailed action plans and whatnot, business plan together. As much as I like an overall boundary of what you need to operate in, for a founder, it's all about unknown. No matter how much you think you got to be prepared, you never can be prepared. So you got to really have that grit. You got to have that passion. You got to have that persuasion and believe in what you really start. You can never be planned. You can never be prepared. You never know. You may be prepared for IPR protection, but trust me, you'll be faced with something else. So it's all about how agile you are, how willing you are to literally turn it around and learn from those pain points. And that's why I said the best blessing for us have been those painful points that we faced, because that's what shaped us today.
But you already had insurance, and that was a smart move. You had an advisory board, so presumably somebody had advised you early on, or you just found out, I need to do these things.
You will like what I'm going to say, Ronnie, now. The reason why you like is we didn't know that we needed to take an insurance whatsoever. We were forced to take the insurance as being part of that contract. Yeah. So, which is why I said they could be very much, everything probably was pre-planned. Because when I was issued the notice to like, hey, hand over the goods, and I was like, I will absolutely hand over the goods, but can you please pay our unpaid bills? They went to the extent of forging a bank document to show that they've actually paid us, and a confirmation document that they've paid us, and to release the goods. The night before this injunction was issued to us, our office was broken into. And we had the intuition to change the locks just 2 days before that. And we did. So a lot of this, everything that happened in our lives have been all about a lot to do with intuition and gut. And we were forced to take that insurance, which was, in fact, have been our blessing.
Gosh, yes, definitely.
So you mentioned about you need grit, and a lot of what you're saying, I feel like you need to be quite a resilient person to start a business if you're going to go through all of these unexpected things. Would you say that anyone can start a business, or anyone should start a business, or are there particular types of people or traits that you think just you've got to have to do it?
Honestly, I think the more I'm seeing a lot, I mean, I became an angel investor in the process myself, and today I have 4 active businesses in multiple sectors. And when I see young founders, 8 out of 10 people just think it's like the buzzword, you know, I'm a founder, I'm an entrepreneur, and the grass is greener on the other side all the time. But unless you have passion and you are totally a crazy person and a risk taker, and you would do whatever it takes to get that vision out, you shouldn't be starting a business yourself. And that is very important. People somehow think being a visionary is enough to run a business. Absolutely not. You need a combination of expertise. You need to have the vision, whether it's coming from you, or in our case, the visionary is quite clear in our three co-founders. And maybe that's why our group has been successful, because our group CTO is the visionary. He gets it. He's always at least a decade ahead. And the other co-founder, he's a complete execution person. He's like the problem solver in the technology space. It's not a single technology problem that he couldn't solve. I've never done that before. I mean, always have had answers and still continue to do so. And I'm a people person. I always say people, as much as I run the technology companies, I'm probably the least technology person out there, because I see every day in, day out myself as a mom, as a typical end user. And that helps me in a big way, because I tend to be the gatekeeper for most of our products before they even get out to the trials. So I think to be a founder, you need to know your strengths and weaknesses. That's the starting point. You really have to have that passion into what you're doing, and those are way more, and be agile and be prepared in the sense prepared to be agile.
Yeah.
Because you will be faced with unknowns.
Yeah. And anybody setting out to create a business, they're going to face obstacles. And I think facing obstacles makes you a better person as well as a better business person as well. Because people, when you have your first idea, I'm sure there's a high percentage of people that will say, nah, not now, or it's not the right thing, or whatever it is. And so you probably grow a thick skin, because you probably don't start off with that.
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked this question, because as I said, I think it also kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. There can never be a plan. If someone is planning to the point to say that, oh, this is not the right time, this is not playing out correctly, maybe I need to put it off, maybe I don't have the right funds, or I don't have the right team, then you're not even fit to be starting a business, honestly to speak. Because the reason is that there's never, and you will be faced with this, as if you were going to be a CEO, you'll be faced with this day in, day out in the decision-making process. As a CEO or as a founder, you need to be able to make a decision. You need to be able to go forward. Whether if you're going to sit there and think, is this the right decision or the wrong decision? What's going to happen to this? You'll never be able to make a decision in time. So my theory is, and what I really live by is, don't worry too much about it's the right or the wrong decision. Worry more about, do you have enough information to make an informed decision? You can never be fully sure, 100% sure whether it's right or wrong. Only time can tell that. So once you've made the decision, that's the first piece of success. Second thing is make it work. And the worst that can happen if you made the wrong decision is you just go back a few steps and you just start over again. So for me, that is really important to get that right.
So you mentioned about, if you're thinking it's not the right time in particular, then maybe starting a business isn't for you. Do you feel like or do you have an opinion on the different times in your life, being a better time to start a business? So when you're younger and, have less responsibility, or if you're a parent, I feel like your perception and you change quite a lot, are there strengths to that?
I think there are pros and cons to everything. And particularly, this may be more relevant to women, because me being a woman, and I think a lot of us are quite ambitious as much as men are, but we women have another approach of having a holistic life in terms of family and kids, and somehow feeling that sense of responsibility. And as young women, if you start business, you do get consumed a lot. And then the body clock starts ticking, and then you don't know when is the right time. And the more I'm seeing the younger generations, I realize that women today are very successful, both in their academics as well as careers. And the more stronger they're getting, the more independent they are, and they feel they don't need anyone to be dependent on. And when you have that mindset, it's impossible to have a family because building a family together, there's never a, I personally don't ever believe that one is superior over the other. Never. They all carry, men and women carry their strengths, and it is okay to be dependent. It's okay to be dependent, and be prepared to be dependent, because that's how the bonding builds, and that's how you can build a beautiful family. And if you keep putting these away, thinking that work has to come first, or your business have to come first, family have to come next, or one way or the other, you have a higher chance of losing something in the process. So I don't think you should plan anything, not to this extent. You may have a rough idea, a calling that you feel connected to say that, yes, I enjoy risk taking, or I enjoy running after my passion. I don't know what it takes me, where it takes me to, but I'm happy to give it a try while I'm young. Do so, but don't compromise on other things, or don't put other things off.
But risk taking is quite a big thing, isn't it? In whatever, whether it's in business or anything else. You know, there's a lot of analysis of, for example, sports people. There's some very, very talented athletes, footballers, rugby players, but they didn't have that commitment to their sport, whether it's to training or whatever it is, to take it to the next level. And then there are examples of those who weren't quite as good, but were prepared to bet on their own ability to work hard, and then they've achieved greatness. And it's, I think what you're saying, it's really the same in business. You know, you've got to be prepared to take risk.
Absolutely. And I think that is the only thing that really defines the success and the level of success they're going to achieve. And you probably heard this term called lifestyle business.
Yeah.
Majority of the businesses and startups that, that are out there tend to become a lifestyle business in most cases. They're not necessarily, all are not the unicorns out there.
Yeah.
And again, that's okay. There's nothing wrong about lifestyle business. So I guess risk taking is a very critical part of it. And how much of risk taking, what appetite you have for that defines a lot of that success as well. And for me, risk taking is interesting because from a psychology point of view, it's also associated with the mindset of, do you have that positive perspective to things, optimistic perspective to things, or the opposite? And one of the biggest challenges I've faced as a leader and having mentoring a lot of departments and team members is that you always come across people of different natures, but a lot often who don't have that positive perspective to life, or have a very narrow perspective and less optimistic in life. And that is very painful to see that.
Yeah.
One thing that you mentioned a little while ago was going into angel investing. And obviously, as a business, you've received investment. What has that journey been like? And I don't know, because you have co-founders that are male, so I don't know if you can comment on anything that you felt specifically as a female, but there's a statistic that I've seen a lot around investment going into female founded businesses. That is 2% of them get VC funding, and 98% of VC funding goes to male founded businesses. What's your view on that as someone who's received investment and been through that yourself?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I've never came across this question before, but yeah, I hear a lot about female investment funds and so forth, women-led investments. But ultimately, it does come down to the business case and what business you're representing, because eventually, whether it's VCs out there or angel investors, they want to invest in the business, and they want to understand what returns that business is going to give them. That tends to be their first criteria. And yes, if it is a women-led business, it probably gives them some additional interests, personal interests, perhaps, I don't know. But for me, I never took any investments from these sort of funding pots. Maybe I should consider for the future rounds. So I think it's certainly for female founders that are starting off now, there are a lot of these funds. By all means, don't do the mistake that I did. Take advantage, go look out. You probably would have some advantage over the others. But predominantly in the past, yes, most investments have always gone around for male-led industries or companies.
Do you have a sense that in this country we're good at backing innovation?
In theory, yes. Yeah, in theory, why not? Because a lot of talk that happens around. I mean, I have a great respect to Innovate UK for what they put out. But how much of that they put out actually translates into results for true innovation and SMEs out there? My personal experience is all I can comment is none to date, although we have been in the most forward and emerging technology space. We couldn't tap into any of that innovation fund just because we are a private-led entity. We won't have necessarily the sort of skill set to tap into to write a public sector grant funding bids. So that's a complete different expertise you require. And through time, we've started to understand what it takes. So you need these academic collaborations who understand public funding and grant funding much better than private sectors. So there are, but I think what's missing in the UK is that you don't have enough networking opportunities to evangelize what support is out there, whether that's through public sector or private sector, and what kind of collaborations do you need to build in order to bring these kind of skill sets that you may not actually have in-house. So once that message is conveyed through regular networking channels, you probably will see a better opportunities. But certainly the only comparison I can give, because my business is international and I have a lot of exposure into what happens in the US, and which is probably why North America is quite successful, is because of this. They have amazing platforms for driving networking across SMEs and also large corporations and building the bridge between the two.
Is there any advice that you would give then to UK businesses who are now thinking, am I doing enough networking, or have I built the right network? Is there anywhere you'd suggest is a good starting point or things to consider when you are building that network that you're hoping will pay off obviously in the future?
Yeah, sure. I think these are things we probably don't utilize the university, the academic channels as much as we should. That is something we probably need more messaging out there. Why? Because the innovation fund gets trickled down through various channels, and particularly through these academic, the higher education organizations. So what I have learned, particularly in my medical business, is that what we did right in this business from very start of it is before we roll out a product. So our first flagship product called pediatric resuscitation was seed funded by Meta from their We Are for Good funding. So we've been pretty blessed in that sense. But when we rolled that product out with Children's Hospital LA, what we did was we brought in academic experts to do independent research and study. And we continue to do that with every other product that we rolled out. And today we have 38 some simulations, and we brought to NHS 9 months ago. And this is where we've now tapped into a lot of the academic research that's out there. And when they do this research of these products, it's not we going and telling how wonderful our product is or our end users telling how great it is. It is these academic experts, unbiased, coming in, doing independent research and study, talking about the product. And that then leads into other collaborations, grant opportunities for both for them and us and for future products. So I would highly recommend any startup to explore their local university network. Tap into that. Most universities have an enterprise spun-offs or enterprise support wing underneath them. So please explore that and build some collaborations through them and Innovate UK as well.
Yes, I was actually at a university event last night for young, it's an incubation program, and they take people from the area of Westminster, and they support them with mentoring and training and so on, and then introduce them to other people. And they give them a little bit of funding to get off the ground. So it's really, what you're saying confirms their approach. But that's interesting that there probably isn't enough of that in the UK, is there?
Yes and no. Not all universities can afford to have an extensive infrastructure or resources to support that level of engagement with SMEs. But a majority of the universities in the UK have already got that infrastructure and resources. In fact, just heading to this podcast this morning, I was speaking to Sean Hydes, the Associate Dean at Coventry University for their creative technologies and humanities. And we were talking exactly the same. We have been working in close collaboration with several universities, and that today translates to real projects. And our passion, both as business and as well as founders, the university gave us the first entrepreneurial break for us. And what we realized is we ended up becoming a natural incubator. So we tend to be the bridge to the universities and to the commercial applications. So we want to be able to create platforms for young talents through these collaborations. And I would encourage any other businesses out there, whether they're in the starting mode or growth mode, to certainly integrate the academic expertise into their plans.
I think something interesting, about the journey that you've been on is starting in HR and, studying in that area and saying you're kind of interested in people and psychology, and then ending up in tech is quite a jump. And something I remember from when I was at school was being told you need to have an idea of what you want to do. What do you want to do? And it was almost like, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? Would you have any advice for students who are thinking about the future and, where they might start on, does your career have to be linear? Or what's the best way of thinking about it, do you think?
It's very interesting you brought the word linear in there, because we as a company, as i3 Simulations, or even as founders, always have been believers of non-linear approach to things. Particularly, that's how i3 was formed. When we provide immersive interactive, if you look at a methodology, training methodology, whether it's textbooks, e-learning, or even VR learning, everything is scripted. But then real world is not. So clearly you can tell that these current methodologies are inadequate in terms of preparing for us to the real world. But whereas when you introduce artificial intelligence, you can bring the advantage of non-linear aspect. So our simulations offer the non-linear, where it gives you contextual challenge and support. So if you could, any two individuals like yourself, if you go into the simulation, it would know your existing ability and it will start adapting the gameplay to your abilities, so giving personalized training. Why I'm giving that example here for your question is that being linear in life is too dangerous. We were talking earlier, right at the start of the podcast, is that if you start preparing your business plan to the dot and strategy to the dot and thinking, okay, now is the right time, everything's looking right, let me get into the business, you already failed at that point. So please be non-linear in many levels. And my only message to the future founders and existing founders would be that my journey, I can relate to mine, is that my only thing that I always do in life, I just enjoy life. I really, really love having fun in life. And that's all I did right at the very start of my career. Nothing changed from then. And So everything that came into my life, that is the opportunity with a technology company or my job role that I did in the EU as fund manager, all of those aspects I really enjoyed doing, which helped me keep going because I was having so much fun doing it. And which is probably why it didn't matter to me whether I have to work 18 hours, 16 hours, or have 2 kids in the process of this. Yeah, you really have to have fun in life. The moment you feel you're not having fun in life, then I think it's time to rethink what you're doing.
Yeah.
I think that's really good advice, actually.
Yeah.
And
No, that's very good advice.
one thing, I'm already kind of in awe of what you've done professionally, but the fact that you have done it through having children. I have 2 children, and that in itself has just been a massive journey and, a lot of learning. How did you manage those years when you were having young children in particular and getting to grips with being a parent and, your husband becoming a father and continuing to grow these businesses?
Yeah, I always kept saying myself, these businesses are my babies, the main thing is that the fact that I enjoy these businesses, that really, really, really helps. And with the children give me satisfaction. It makes me happy. The family makes me happy. And the biggest advice I can give anyone who are in a similar shoes as me, I mean, there may be many women out there, but with different circumstances. Maybe they have a quite demanding executive role or career, but not having to worry about a family or kids, or they have a family, but not necessarily kids, or whatever may be the combination of things. My mantra was really about take one day at a time. And there are so many occasions in life that we were in the toughest times that anyone can imagine. And in those moments, what I do is literally just take an hour at a time, nothing more. And that truly helped me, because the moment you start thinking about the bigger things in those situations, you worry and you panic, and your perspective to life start being very different. So when you take 1 hour at a time, you have no much pressure to think about worry, and you'll be absolutely perfectly fine. And that's really what helped. And so I'm always there for my kids. My kids never felt that I'm a working mom, and my only motive have been that I never wanted them to feel that I'm a working mom. So they don't even realize, and they count on me as much as you would see in another family where mom may be mostly homemaker. And yeah, it's exactly the same for them.
That's great advice. 1 hour at a time.
Yeah.
I think it's been an excellent conversation with you. I've really enjoyed it. We have a couple of final questions for you.
So this is the tradition.
This is our new tradition, yes.
Yeah, new
New
tradition.
tradition. Am I the first one to experiment with?
Yeah, it's a contradiction in terms of new tradition, but do you want to ask the question?
So the previous guest always answers a question from the guest before, and then asks a new question for us to ask our later guest. So the question that we had last time, I think, is a very good one, and definitely aligns with some of the conversation we've already had. What is the best life advice that you've ever received?
So, many, but I'm trying to pick one, because just yesterday I was talking to one of my business mentors who's in VC, as an investor, not necessarily in our business, but in general, she's a VC. And but we relate very much so, because like yourself, she has 2 kids and similar age groups as me, and quite a demanding work role. And it was our regular weekly meet. She turns up on this video call, and they're like, Devi, do you have these moments? And I knew exactly where she was going. And she was like, I don't know why I have to have my kitchen really clean. And I'm like, deep down thinking, I know that feeling, because I exactly do the same. And then that conversation went on for 5-10 minutes. And so coming back to the best life lesson I've had. This is a lot probably more relatable to women. I have another mentor, very experienced gentleman. And I meet this gentleman once a year, or maybe sometimes once in 2-3 years. And and he's a billionaire, by the way, very successful. And was sitting across the table. I see him as a dear friend and a mentor. Sitting across the table, he said, "Hey, Devi, how have you been?" I said, "Yeah, I've been great." And I give this 1-2 lines update about the business of High 3 simulations. He's never seen me for about 24 months before that. And then he says to me, "Devi, I just have small advice." I said, "Yeah, please go for it." And I'm always all ears when I'm hearing him. And he says, he had a cup, he was having coffee or tea. And then he said, "Look, women," he said. I said, "Yeah." I says, "They have an issue. They want the cup to be kept like this, or you keep the cup like this, let's say, and they expect everybody else to keep the cup exactly like this. That's what the problem is, and that's where the problem is." And I just knew straight away what he was saying. And it was relating to me at all levels, personally, in my family life, as well as in my work life. Why? Because we women most often have this subconscious aspect of being perfect in everything. And it took me a decade and a half to really, and I did this experiment on my husband. He's also the co-founder. So it took me a decade and a half to try and change him and his ways, because he's not a process person at all. And which sort of, when you step back, remove that sort of a family connection and look at it, you're like, yeah, of course he's a visionary. He's a disruptive guy, a creative guy. There's no way you're going to expect process from them. But it took me, I don't know what I was going after. I was trying to change the DNA. Only a year, around COVID time, when I spent more psychology aspects, read more of it, I understood that they're just wired differently. Men typically are so differently wired to women. So don't try and change. We can multitask really well. Men, I'm not generalizing in not saying everybody is, but majority of men are really good at one task that you give them and they can master it. But you expect multiple things to be done at the same time, you probably be disappointed. And coming back to women, the perfection aspect exists in many of us. And we want everything to be exactly done the way we expect it to be done. And that's a serious problem. And I think we need to work more on us as opposed to others, because if we keep working on others, all we're going to be faced with is disappointment. And another thing we need to learn is no one's going to be perfect. No one can be you. So it is okay if they are 60% there, 70% there. Be happy that they're at least getting there. And that's your big lesson, or for me, it has been the biggest lesson.
That's great advice, actually, and I've taken notes, and I'm going to be sharing them with someone close to me. Oh, but I won't say any more.
So
Rings a lot of bells, though.
well, I can relate as a woman, definitely.
I can relate as a victim.
Most men are victim. I do sympathize with that.
It's a little unfair, but yeah, no, it's interesting what you say. That perfection, I've seen that quite a lot, and I think it's good for you too. It's good that we've explained that as well, because I think a lot of people will identify with that. And even if they stop for a moment and reflect on it, and it helps change, that'd be fantastic.
Do you have a question? Sorry to put you on the spot, that we can ask the next guest.
I'm very keen to know and learn how founders are managing and mentoring their teams on perspective, because a lot of it is down to energy. So how are they mentoring their teams in bringing that highest energy points to work on a everyday basis, so that consistent energy into work? How are they doing it?
Good question.
Very good
Thank
question.
you.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you very much for coming here.
Thank you very
It's been
much
a
for
pleasure
having me.
to meet you and to talk through your career so far, which has been fascinating and really successful to date, and long may it continue to be successful. I think we've gained a lot of insights.
Yes, thank you so much.
No, thank you both. It's been a really lovely conversation. I totally enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.